Now, I will tell you guys, yesterday I was talking with somebody who has worked with Elijah Schaffer. They said that they can't confirm nor deny anything with Sydney Watson, but that working with Elijah Schaffer is a massive dick. That is what I can tell you. Somebody who has worked with Elijah Schaffer told me last night that Elijah Schaffer is a massive dick. Also, you guys will recall that there was a Twitter space a few months ago that we listened to where all of these conservative commentators came out of the woodworks to rag on Elijah Schaffer because he has a history. So, even that woman in the space defending him admitted he groped her. Yeah, I remember. Sydney Watson sues The Blaze. Sydney Watson is suing The Blaze for retaliation, wrongful termination, and sex and religious discrimination based on alleged abuse perpetrated by Elijah Schaffer. This is Sydney Watson. She's a well-known conservative commentator. Patriot J tweeted this out. Thread: Get Mr. Schaffer to stop talking about dicks so much. Sydney Watson is suing The Blaze for retaliation, wrongful termination, and sex and religious discrimination based on alleged abuse perpetrated by Elijah Schaffer, according to a copy of the complaint obtained and reviewed by Patriot J. Now, I will tell you guys, yesterday I was talking with somebody who has worked with Elijah Schaffer. They said that they can't confirm nor deny anything with Sydney Watson, but that working with Elijah Schaffer is a massive dick. That is what I can tell you. Somebody who has worked with Elijah Schaffer told me last night that Elijah Schaffer is a massive dick. Also, you guys will recall that there was a Twitter space a few months ago that we listened to where all of these conservative commentators came out of the woodworks to rag on Elijah Schaffer because he has a history. So, and there were a couple of female commentators that came out and said that he was inappropriate with them. I believe Savannah was one of them. Anyways. And that was a banger Twitter space, by the way. Through her counsel, Kurt Schlichter, Watson on Wednesday filed a 4-count lawsuit against Blaze Media in federal court that alleges Glenn Beck's media empire created and tolerated a hostile work environment and allowed sexual harassment, retaliation, and discrimination against her on the basis of her sex and religion. Watson and Schaffer starred in the widely beloved You Are Here, Blaze TV podcast from September 2021 through April 2022. Per the complaint, the maximum value of Watson's multi-year agreement with Blaze was approximately $1,275,000. However, the 7-figure deal is only one of the reasons she has signed the contract with Blaze. Is anybody surprised? A lot of people thought Elijah Schaffer was gay. A lot of people thought he was gay. But turns out Elijah Schaffer is like a compulsive sexual harasser, essentially. I didn't realize she was suing for religious discrimination too. Yeah, she is. Watson chose Blaze because the company represented itself as an incubator of talent and pointed to Dee Loesch and Tommy Lahiren's success of evidence as such. She also said the company's moral values were important to her decision. Unfortunately, trouble in Paradise began as early as December 2021, leading to multiple complaints made to management and weekly interactions with them since January 2022. I didn't know that Sydney was an atheist. Watson complained to Blaze leadership of Schaffer's misogyny, drinking on set, and grossly sexual nature, but Blaze refused to act because he was their star and a primary asset, which as a result failed to protect Watson's rights and the integrity of the program. Rather than act on her complaints, Blaze instead opted to cater to the demands, tantrums, and misbehavior of Schaffer, the complaint alleges. Watson claims Schaffer's persona on YAH became increasingly aggressive and soon began to veer into outright misogyny. He appeared to enjoy the intimidation factor that his physical size gave him with respect to Miss Watson, according to the complaint. The choice of guests compounded Miss Watson's growing discomfort and the anti-female tone of the show and the off-air interactions with her co-host. Notably, Watson points to YAH December 3rd episode featuring notorious bigot Nick Fuentes as evidence of the increasingly hostile work environment. He was grossly misogynistic, and most troubling was how this appeared to be condoned by Mr. Schaffer, Watson says of Fuentes' appearance. It was about this time that the environment on the production began to become notably more hostile, not merely to Miss Watson, but to many of the women at Blaze. Next, Watson points to the infamous Jack Murphy live episode and Schaffer's reaction as another example of the sexist, hostile workplace. Watson claims Schaffer refused to control Murphy because Watson, as a woman, would have looked weaker if Schaffer demanded his guests stop his abuse. Watson accused Schaffer of unilaterally booking several guests with particularly contemptible and sexist opinions towards women after the show returned from the holiday break in January 2022. As a serious journalist, Watson did not agree to assume the role of the designated punching bag for the sexist guests and for Mr. Schaffer himself, nor was she warned about it in advance, according to the complaint. Watson said the alleged conduct is appalling, particularly in light of the Blaze's representation to its audience of largely conservative Americans that it stood for solid traditional values. The complaint also takes a shot at YAH most loyal viewers. Watson blasted Schaffer for cultivating an audience that uses the idea of being traditional as a cover for its extreme misogyny. Such viewers often flooded YAH discussions with super chats and grossly sexist comments, as well as anti-Jewish commentary that made Miss Watson extremely uncomfortable and prevented her from performing her duties as she wished, the complaint states. These audience members, encouraged by Mr. Schaffer's conduct, attacked Miss Watson so often and so intensely that other guests noted it and were put off. Schaffer and the audience had a running gag for Watson to read fans' super chats that were allegedly coded dog whistles that referenced grossly misogynistic and or anti-Semitic comments, unbeknownst to Watson. Schaffer encouraged this humiliation despite her complaints to him and management. Watson is suing for religious discrimination because Schaffer consistently made disrespectful comments about her being an atheist, which encouraged the audience to attack her. Much of the alleged conduct that contributed to the hostile work environment was explicitly sexual in nature. Schaffer would endlessly reference sex, often specifically gay sex, and discuss penises, among other sexual matter, often graphically in front of the guests and Miss Watson. Schaffer's sexual comments were so pervasive that, at one point, Blaze CEO Tyler Cardon asked Watson to get Mr. Schaffer to stop talking about dicks so much. Jeez. However, Watson told Cardon to speak with Schaffer because Schaffer allegedly refused to listen to women. Schaffer's apparent refusal to listen to women was insulting and damaged Watson's ability to perform her duties. Watson also complained that it was impossible to work professionally in an environment where Schaffer was drunk and impaired, as he would do shots of hard liquor before many of the shows. The YAH team held a 2-hour meeting in March, which Blaze President Gaston Moody was present for, where Watson expressed how Schaffer's constant sexism and hostile, unprofessional behavior on the show distracted and humiliated her, making it impossible for her to do her job. Watson allegedly told Schaffer point blank that the sexism bothered her and made her want to quit. Sounds like he's a true alpha male. I mean, this dude is clearly living his values. Yeah, well, that's what was the subject of that Twitter space from a month or two ago, where everybody on the conservative aisle was tearing into him. Schaffer then had a tantrum where he refused to sit in on YAH production meetings until his demands were met. Frustrated with Watson's disapproval of YAH's guests, Schaffer refused to help select guests, which increased the burden on Miss Watson. Blaze repeatedly promised to take corrective actions, but ultimately failed to act. Watson notes that Schaffer's social media interactions are a component of his participation in the show, and he used these interactions to continue his harassment. Watson pointed to this April tweet from Schaffer in response to Seb Gorka as evidence of the online harassment. I bet he wouldn't just sit there like a coward when a man cussed out a woman in front of him, Elijah? I hope she sees this and sleeps with you. After that April tweet, Watson told Blaze CEO Cardon and President Gaston that she could no longer continue working for YAH. Cardon then informed Schaffer of Watson's departure and told him the show was over. A few weeks after leaving YAH, Blaze gave Watson the green light to issue a public statement explaining YAH's conclusion. Even that woman in the space defending him admitted he groped her. Yeah, I remember. Wait, how is this related to Nick Rekieta? You guys are saying this is another bad look for Nick Rekieta? All right, this is Sydney Watson's post. All right, my young potates, I wanted to address what I can about You Are Here. I'd like to provide some closure so we can all move on. I left the show. There were a multitude of reasons for doing so. Ultimately, the professional situation morphed into something untenable. Towards the end, I was extremely unhappy. Like I mentioned before, I was pouring from an empty cup. While I tried to be professional and happy for you all on air, it wasn't sustainable. I am genuinely sorry the situation wasn't handled better with keeping you all looped in. Trust me when I say it's been painful and confusing to navigate. I'm not interested in blood sports or drama. I think we've all got bigger fishes to fry. I'm thankful for the opportunity from Blaze and what's to come. No, I didn't get fired, you noodles. Sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. It sucks. But like some divorces between mom and dad, I promise this is better for everyone. It's pretty decent, closure statement from Sydney Watson. At the time, Schaffer tweeted in response to this, finding out about my show's future on Twitter along with the public like. And then it shows the smiley face melting. In response, Watson said he had known for weeks that show was over and blasted him for adding further dishonesty to the rumor mill. Elijah, you've known for weeks that I stepped away. I was approved to let the audience know there was no sense in adding further dishonesty to the rumor mill. It serves nobody. I wish you the best with slightly offensive in all things to come. I mean, look at this dishonesty. Finding out my show's future on Twitter along with the public, like, smiley melting face. Dude, fuck this guy. Elijah Schaffer's a piece of shit. Side note, I tried to find YAH clips to add to this thread, but it appears Blaze has made every episode private and rebranded the channel for the recent launch of Primetime with Alex Stein. The Blaze has removed all of Elijah Schaffer and Sydney Watson's old You Are Here content and rebranded the channel with Alex Stein to instantly give him 132k subs. Channel is losing 1k sub a day, very shady. Watson's complaints go on to accuse Schaffer of telling several people, including InfoWars' Harrison Smith and Tucker Carlson Originals director Scooter Downey, that he had to sue Watson to keep her quiet because she allegedly tried to get Schaffer's wife to divorce him. She also alleged that Schaffer falsely told several people that Miss Watson had made passes at him and tried to hit on him on more than one occasion. Watson argues Blaze constructively terminated her employment agreement in spring 2022, or actively terminated it in July 2022 after she complained about her former co-host's conduct. In September 2022, Blaze ultimately cut ties with Schaffer after an investigation regarding a recent personnel matter, which had to do with Savannah, I believe. Here's the tweet. Following an investigation regarding a recent personnel matter, Elijah Schaffer's employment with Blaze Media has been terminated for violating company policies and standards. Watson is seeking damages for mental anguish, pain and suffering, lost wages and benefits, both back pay and front pay, punitive damages in the highest amount under the law, and an award of attorney's fees. But for the discriminatory and retaliatory actions by the Blaze, based on Miss Watson's sex and religion, Miss Watson would have continued to thrive and develop her career. Full disclosure, I appeared on 2 February episodes of YAH. I will not express my thoughts. I'm just here to report the facts of an interesting lawsuit. I will say, though, that I'm grateful to Elijah, Sydney, and the entire Blaze Media crew for providing the opportunity to speak on their platform. That's fucking wild. There's another article on this. Glenn Beck's media empire sued for ignoring star host sexual harassment. A one-time host at the Blaze says right-wing star Elijah Schaffer was often drunk on set and sexually harassing her. A year ago, Sydney Watson was poised to be a new star in the heady world of right-wing media. She was a few months into co-hosting a show on Glenn Beck's The Blaze, an online video network, launching pad for big conservative personalities like Tomi Lahren and Dana Loesch. Watson had signed a multi-year deal with the Blaze Media that she claims was worth nearly $1.3 million. But Watson had a problem. Her co-host, pugnacious Blaze pundit Elijah Schaffer. Watson thought Schaffer was setting her up to fail, insisting on grossly misogynistic guests and even joking on Twitter about how he wanted her to sleep with talk radio host Sebastian Gorka. According to Watson, Schaffer was often drunk on set, slugging shots of liquor around recording time. Schaffer was obsessed with talking about sex, often specifically gay sex, in Watson's account, and would talk about it frequently around her and their guests. After months of complaints from Watson, Blaze CEO Tyler Cardon allegedly came to her with a gripe of his own. Could she convince Schaffer to cut down on all the penis talk? As Watson put it, Cardon asked her to get Schaffer to stop talking about dicks so much. But in her telling, Watson knew it was pointless. Schaffer would never listen to a woman. In a lawsuit filed Wednesday against the Blaze, Watson says her career was derailed after Blaze Media management ignored her warnings about Schaffer's sexual harassment. The lawsuit portrays Watson as a woman struggling to make her way in a conservative media company where concerns about harassment were ignored. Lamau, how are you not cracking? I don't know. Schaffer was ultimately fired from the Blaze in September after allegedly drunkenly assaulting another Blaze Media host by groping her breasts during a movie premiere. At the time, the Blaze tweeted he had been fired for violating company policies and standards. But Watson's claims in her lawsuit that executives at the Blaze knew that Schaffer's problems with female employees went back far earlier. The Blaze management was fully aware that they had a problem with Mr. Schaffer, but he was their star, the lawsuit reads. He was abusive and sexist to other women at the Blaze as well. Asked for comment, Watson's attorney, Kurt Schleiter, a conservative media personality in its own right, referred the Daily Beast to the complaint. The Blaze and Schaffer didn't respond to requests for comment. Schaffer made his name on the Schaffer made his name on the right covering protests and riots in 2020. Starting in September 2021, Watson and Schaffer co-hosted a talk show for The Blaze called You Were Here from The Blaze's Texas studios. Once Schaffer received his co-hosting spot at The Blaze, according to Watson, he insisted on inviting guests like grossly misogynistic white nationalist leader Nick Fuentes. In her account, Watson felt herself set up as Schaffer's foil, embarrassed by her co-host and tricked into reading anti-Semitic messages from Schaffer's far-right fans aloud to the show. It became a running gag for Mr. Schaffer and his audience that some of Mr. Schaffer's fans would leave super chat comments with coded dog whistles that reference grossly misogynistic and or anti-Semitic comments for Miss Watson to read with her not knowing what they meant. So we already read that part. Watson's problems with Schaffer escalated in December 2021 when the pair interviewed Jack Murphy, then a sort of would-be guru in the hyper-masculine manosphere. Shortly before the interview, though, Murphy had been exposed by online critics for his involvement in unusual sexual practices and his own past of adult performances on webcams. When Watson asked him about that history, she claims, Murphy began to berate her. I'm sure a lot of us have seen this. Rather than defend her, according to the lawsuit, Schaffer tried to cheer up his guest. Watson began to feel she had been turned into the designated punching bag for the sexist guests and for Mr. Schaffer himself. The idea behind the show was never that it was to be a forum for humiliation and abuse of the female co-host as the male host smirked and egged on this appalling behavior, the complaint reads. In her lawsuit, Watson claims Schaffer was frequently drunk during broadcasts. It did not help that Mr. Schaffer would get drunk on set and get guests drunk as well. We've read this part. He would do shots of hard liquor before many of the shows. It was impossible to work professionally in an environment where her co-host was drunk and impaired. The relationship between the hosts broke down, according to Watson, when Schaffer refused to stop unilaterally booking misogynistic and abusive people on their show. Watson claims Blaze management ignored her many complaints about Schaffer's treatment of her, protecting him as the company star. Their fight regularly spilled into the public eye. In April 2022, for example, Schaffer tweeted that he hoped Watson would sleep with Gorka, a former Trump White House advisor. In the lawsuit, Watson describes herself as devastated by Schaffer's suggestion. According to her lawsuit, the company fired Watson in July after a lawyer working for Watson complained again to the company about Schaffer's actions. Still, Schaffer kept criticizing Watson even after their show ended, referencing her in thinly veiled Twitter posts and live stream appearances with other conservative personalities. At a July movie premiere, for example, Watson says that Schaffer made a series of outlandish claims against her to prominent Fox News and InfoWars employees. Schaffer allegedly told other media figures that Watson was bent on seeing Schaffer divorce his wife and was blackmailing him about personal indiscretions after trying to seduce him. In her lawsuit, Watson claims management at Blaze Media never took her allegations against Schaffer seriously, only firing him after he allegedly groped another employee. The Blaze instead opted to cater to the demands, tantrums, and misbehavior of another young rising star, a male one who, long after Miss Watson had been terminated for complaining and demanding justice, was finally fired based on allegations that he physically assaulted and manhandled at least one other female, the Blaze employee, the complaint reads. Damn. I feel bad for her, but Bossett had a point. Not to victim blame, she 100% seems to have a case. But I'm not surprised that the author of the Me Too movement has ruined workplaces, found herself in a workplace alongside a harasser. Yeah. His passion for penis is admirable. Nice, Nicholas.
So when the Me Too movement came up last year, I remember reading through my news feed the day that it all happened and just thinking, well, here we fucking go. So a couple weeks ago, Ariana Huffington, so the owner of Huffington Post, posted 3 times as many male managers are now uncomfortable mentoring women in the wake of the Me Too movement. This is a huge step in the wrong direction. We need more men to #mentor her. The more important thing in this to me is mentor her. Really? Again, we are hijacking social issues to make them about women. Now, it really comes as no surprise that the PC brigade hasn't really caught up to the idea yet that women in the workplace are a liability. Now, it's probably not very fair, people will probably get very upset about it, but the reality is, it's actually the truth of the matter. Further, I am completely unsurprised that men are uncomfortable to be around women in the workplace. That's not surprising in any capacity. Why? Well, the first thing is that These movements, the Me Too movement, this push for a gynocentric workplace has really just created a framework that's basically impossible for people to work within. I mean, the main thing that I can see is that it's allowed victimhood and anxiety and stress to overtake normal social interaction, in addition to oversensitivity. But that's nothing new with the feminists. Yes, men and women work side by side, which is basically inevitable in a society where there are two genders, specifically two, not more than that, just
Nice,
two.
Sydney.
The bigger issue is that these non-sexual harassment frameworks stretch so far and cover so many areas and are so ambiguous.
Did you say gynocentric?
That it's
Yeah,
hard
she
to
did.
know when someone's going to get offended, someone's going to feel a particular
she's
way,
never-
and they're going to do something.
Well, she clearly now is in a situation where she can probably relate to most people who were, saying hashtag Me Too. She is now in a situation with Elijah Schaffer where she can relate to it.
Something about it, whether or not they're actually in the right to do that. So I jumped on the Human Rights Commission website and went to the area that details what
When she recorded this, I think she was still in uni and hadn't had a real job. Okay, makes sense.
sexual harassment is in Australia, and there's a handful of them that I can reconcile. I can understand why it's on the list. But then there's a handful of them that I really don't understand. Staring or leering, intrusive questions or statements about your private life, and displaying posters, magazines, and screensavers of a sexual nature. The problem is that these terms are really ambiguous. How long does someone have to stare at someone else for that to be
How old
considered
is this
sexual
video?
harassment?
4 years, yeah.
Is it 4 seconds and then a woman gets offended and she can suddenly do something about it? Statements about your personal life? Like what? He asked me about my childhood. I think the reality is that it just sets up a workplace scenario where nobody wins. Having to consider every single social interaction you have with another person for fear of them misconstruing your actions, I don't think that's social progress. I think that's social regression. I think there's a massive difference between protecting women in the workplace and then also making them into social pariahs. This constant and ongoing push for not only equality but also for protection, particularly for females, it doesn't really help social interaction between men and women. What it does is make the whole thing a pretty oversensitive affair. It erodes respect, it creates a culture of hesitancy, and it also puts a lot of emphasis on social interaction where there was none there before. It makes it virtually impossible to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody of the opposite sex without fearing that it's going to come back and be something to do with sexual harassment. I just felt so harassed. He asked me to dinner and I said no, but he full insisted. No, he's your boss, and it's the annual sales meeting, and the only food that's going to be there
Hey,
are
Hero, have a great night.
sandwiches. Oh, wow, he stared at me for way too long anyway. I think that all of this runs entirely contrary to this whole I am woman, hear me roar thing that's been adopted by the feminist movement, which is kind of not surprising in any capacity because most of third wave feminism is built upon victimhood. I find it really sad that in a lot of ways women are a liability in the workplace. Men lose their jobs regularly because of false allegations or unproven allegations or things that simply don't have any evidence to back them up. And what we've basically said is that we don't care about due process. We don't care about innocent till proven guilty because every single person that's accused of this stuff is stamped guilty and thrown away. And that's basically how we deal with these situations. Really, you just get fired. The worst part is that often when these allegations turn out to be false, there's no repercussions. No women lose their jobs over it. Oh, we just ruin the man's life, but that's absolutely fine.
She's making up situations that at best are rare, but ignoring things that are much more common issues. Yeah, I agree.
Just as long as the woman wasn't really sexually assaulted. So I guess the reality is that when you create a society and a workplace that encourages victimhood, you just have people looking for reasons to be a victim.